r/AskReddit. Teachers, what is the most NSFW thing have you done in your classroom? Okay, I'm not proud of this, but here we go. It was my first year teaching high school English to a bunch of thugs. I was only a few years older than some of them. Near the end of class, two guys are arguing loudly and I tell them to knock it off. They ask me to settle their argument for them. This kid, let's call him Greg, says, "Mr. Canohead, if some guy puts a gun to your head and tells you to give him a blowjob, you'd have to do it, right, Greg?" I say, "That's not a conversation to have during class. The whole class is listening intently now." "Well," says Greg, "if someone put a gun to my head and told me to give him a blowjob, I'd do it." "Well, Greg," I said, "I'll remember that the next time I have a gun." The class erupted in laughter. Somehow I don't get fired. I'm a student, but in my 7th grade English class my teacher's boob fell out of her dress when she bent to pick something up. Teaching a science class about goats and sheep. To show the kids, middle schoolers and high schoolers, the animals up close, we planned on going to a livestock auction. To prep them for the auction, I told them to not point or raise their hands, because it was an actual auction and they might bid on the animal accidentally. For the respect of the community and business, they shouldn't do anything that looked like they were bidding. Then the questions came. What if we bid? Who would have to pay for it? What if I raise my hand to ask you a question? What if I think the animal is cute and bid on it? One kid wouldn't let it go. So I said, jokingly, "If you bid on any of the animals, I'll put you up for auction." Only African American kid in the class. Didn't get fired. Felt awful. Too long didn't read, accidentally told an African American kid I was going to auction him off. Edit. Thanks for the gold. My maths teacher took a ruler off a student who was annoying him with it, licked it, then threw it out a window. The student then retaliated by grabbing the teacher's ruler and licking it. The teacher just sits there and says, "I don't give a damn. I use that to scratch my balls, no repercussions whatsoever." Edit. So to give some more background, if you know the Irish schooling system, we were in TY, so absolutely nothing was being done anyways. Math teacher got mad after a kid made a smart aleck remark, asked him to drop his pants in front of the whole class to prove how big his balls were. He was fired. Never found out the size of that kid's balls. I shit you not. Last week a kid lit up a joint in a classroom. 7th grade. I had a 7th grade class where a kid would go around showing his balls to people and lighting his pubes on fire. My father is a history teacher at a high school in the city. Once a particularly churlish student, who sat in the front row, was blatantly and shamelessly on his phone in the middle of class. Naturally, my father tells him to hand over the phone. Surprisingly, the kid gives it up without a fight. However, the kid quickly pulls another phone out of his pocket. "I have 2 phones. The kid sneers. He points to the phone in his hand. "This one is for business." He points to the phone in my father's hand. "And that one is for pleasure." "Well then," my father says, "that explains why this one is on vibrate." To this day my dad is surprised that he didn't lose his job right then and there. In 9th grade I ducked my teacher's daughter. My teacher called me a man horse in front of my whole class. My teacher was a woman. Your hand must have been bloody from all the high fives. Students were using perfume in water pistols. Teacher got sprayed. She stabbed student with pencil. Student got in trouble. Good times 1960. I was a marching band instructor, just in the summer for band camp. One of the kids was eating a bag of Skittles during a break and she asked me, "Do you want to taste my rainbow?" Without thinking, I blurted out, "Not until you're 18. I wasn't fired. I'm a little embarrassed to admit this, but here it goes. Sometimes after the droves of 14 and 15-year-olds shuffle back to their respective homes for the day, I take my shoes off and walk around the building in my socks. When I was in 8th grade, the class clown thought he was untouchable. He was a man among boys. I believe he was held back a year, taller than just about anybody, and growing in his facial hair. He was always doing whatever he wanted, throwing food at lunch, skipping class, and just about anything that he felt would get a reaction. All the girls loved him too. They thought he was the hottest thing this side of the sun. so they usually let him get away with saying or doing things most of us couldn't. One day, I guess all of that got to his head, because he was flirting with a group of girls in the back of the class, and decided whipping out his dong was a good idea. But not only did he whip it out, he put it on the kid's shoulder in front of him and showed it off to the girls around him. He got in trouble because little Susie got scared by the anaconda and screamed. Everyone turned around and the classroom erupted with all kinds of reactions. Best I remember were Ms. French letting out an oh my god and the kid who had dong shoulder screaming like a little girl. Too long didn't read. Class clown takes a group of girls to Dongtown. Not a teacher, but in training. I was in placement within a primary school and a little kid shit himself. I felt really bad for him and went to get a teacher without others finding out. But this kid started screaming that someone had shit under his desk. I then realized he had scooped it out and threw it under his desk, and squishing it under his shoe for authenticity. Anyway, I then had to escort a whole class out of a classroom and tell the real story to a teacher, which suspended the child for 2 days. Squish, squish, establishing dominance. Well, I sexually harassed my entire class. We were discussing captcha in regards to AI versus human intelligence and I made the mistake of using a captcha with a D. Flash forward to the middle of class where I'm asking one of my students, Jared, you've seen many Ds before, but never this D. How do you know it's a D? Does it have some kind of D-ness? What makes a D a D? Etc. At this point most of the class is laughing. Jared is very confused, and I'm just hating myself. Lesson learned. Do not discuss the D or its D-ness with undergraduates. I taught Othello. Props. Yeah, they usually have a few in plays like Othello. Not a teacher, but this happened when I was in high school. About 35 years ago, my English teacher was the hot teacher in the school. One day, she's sitting at her desk and I had a question to ask. Raised my hand, went to her desk, and from where she was sitting and I was standing in the dress she was wearing, could see a good deal down her top. I said, "Whoa, look at all those freckles," and went on to my question without missing a beat. Fast forward to the end of the school year as we are taking our final exams and she walks over to my desk. It slowly leans with over so I could get a good look and whispers, "I've not worn this dress since you commented on all my freckles." Pause. "Now it's your turn to blush." She smiles and walks away. Class to but under the desk. There's a word for it. My 7th grade English teacher who was in her first year never had control of her classroom. A couple weeks before the end of the year our class was arguing with her about something and she screamed, "Duck you all." Never saw Mrs. Wallace again. Edit. This was in 2005 in Iowa. Working as a classroom TA in a primary school, the teacher was talking recycling and composting. She drew an apple core on the whiteboard only it looked exactly like a vagina. In a fit of giggles I had to leave the room to compose myself. Not a teacher, but my honors pre-calculus teacher said good pre-calc teachers are just lube for the ass raping you will receive in college calc. I was looking at porn on Tumblr last year. 3 years ago my current geometry teacher was suspended for having porn downloaded on his classroom computer. Like why? What makes you think it's a good idea to ducking download porn onto a school computer? One of my teachers has an awesome ass. Like really nice. She wears tight pants and a thong most days. It's pretty ducking obvious. My buddy once took me to some sketchy house to buy some weed and there is an elementary school teacher in the living room shooting heroin. On her lunch break, she finishes, high as duck, grabs her lunch off the kitchen table, and says, "Oh duck, my lunch break is almost over. Time to get back to teaching kids." She laughs, walks out the back door, and my buddy asks the guy we were meeting if she really is a school teacher. The guy, also ducked up from slamming dope, says, "Yep, she like teaches little elementary kids and shit." What the duck? I was teaching 5, 7, 8-year-olds beginning woodworking at a private school and we were painting our projects. We were in a room alone and I was a 35-year-old male. A young girl who was wearing a denim shorts and skirt set got paint all over her skirt. I caught myself with my hand under her skirt trying to wash the paint off with a wet cloth and thought, what would anyone think if they walked in on this scene? I let her clean off the paint as best she could and finished the class. It scared the hell out of me. I once climbed out of the window to pick some cherries, shared them with the students. One time I stood on a chair to reach a top shelf rather than using a stepladder. This wasn't me, but some kid was caught jacking it in Spanish class and was repeatedly told to stop, but continued to until he was switched to study hall. That's some stamina. We once convinced a substitute teacher that The Warriors was a remake of West Side Story and that we had been instructed to watch it for theater class. We were 14. Best lesson ever. Substitute teacher. So today this 9th grade class I was covering tried to convince me The Warriors was a West Side Story remake. So I played dumb so we could all watch The Warriors. When I was in high school, everyone had suspicions that this one teacher was gay. During one class he was opening files from his laptop and they were being projected onto the overhead. Accidentally opened a folder of naked photos of himself and another man. Entire class of grade 10 saw. Safe to say all suspicions were confirmed. I was sitting next to a kid one day in 8th grade and he called my name. I looked over and he had whipped his dong out and was staring at me. Kid's a duckin' weird dude. Not a teacher, but this happened to my teachers. There was two teachers who were married and were working at the same school. They also had rooms next to each other with a small storage room between them. In there they had a whole kitchen, shelves with glassware, a TV and most importantly, a couch, and every so often they would meet there and have sex during lunch. The school found out and they were both forced to quit. They moved to a different town and got new jobs at different schools. Not a teacher, but when I was a high school senior I had a homeroom teacher in her early 20s. She was also an NFL cheerleader. Very hot. She showed me how she could fit her fist in her mouth. When she was done she looked at me and said she probably shouldn't have done that. I agreed but said thank you. I used to sub at a couple of high schools. If I had some downtime when the kids were taking a test, I'd grab the roster and start looking up the kids' Twitters. It always amazed me how stupid kids are with social media. Pictures of them doing drugs, drinking, talking shit about teachers, gossiping about other students. Finding the I hate this a-hole or we have the hot sub tweets were always the highlight of my day. Not me, but my 9th grade religion teacher had sex with another freshman. I've told a few lads that I'm banging their mums. It's good for taking them down a few notches and back to focusing on their work. This works better if you homeschool your children. My science teacher freshman year had the best way to get students to not text in class. He gave a student a not in use phone before class and told him to pretend he was texting halfway through class. He proceeded to walk towards the student and request the phone from him. The student pretends to put up a fight but eventually gives the teacher the phone. The class was on the 2nd story, was an outside school, and the teacher started to walk to the door and throw the phone off the 2nd story. The student, pretending, started to freak out, but all the other students' faces were all priceless. None of the students ever texted in class again. Not a teacher, but have a worthwhile story. 12th ducking grade. This kid was beating his dong in the back of the class during Romeo and Juliet. No one noticed until the girl in front of him had to hand the class walk to him needed for the day. To clarify, the seating arrangement for the class was done, or the kid had the very last seat of the row that was tucked away in the corner, which is why no one noticed until the paperwork was being handed out. Everyone in the class started roaring in laughter when we all noticed it. The principal, the assistant principal, and the state trooper had to come up to remove him. Had a class of 6 retesters. The retest results came back in early December and they had all passed. Since I knew I wouldn't have them back in my class after Christmas break, I thought duck it and decided to culture them by showing Pulp Fiction over the course of 3 days if they promised not to say a word to the administration. The only part I skipped was the actual raping in the rape scene. Got away with it clean. On my last day of student teaching I agreed to play Cards Against Humanity with some of the students. When it was my turn to judge, instead of putting in relevant white cards the students put in the most vulgar cards they had. Hearing the student teacher read cards like 2 midgets shitting in a box, getting your dong stuck in a Chinese finger trap with another dong, and Moses gargling Jesus balls while Buddha and Shiva penetrate his divine holes really made the students crack up. Not me. But my 10th grade biology teacher was answering a question from a student who asked, can another animal impregnate a human? He replied, I'm sure we've all been in that situation. Click one wrong link on the internet and whoa, what is she doing with that horse? But no, that is not possible. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.